Ready.
Yeah. Okay, I hope everyone had a nice break. I think we're going to get restarted. So this is our fourth segment, and the chair of the segment is Peter Blank, who's a university professor at Syracuse University. This is the highest honor or title that someone can be given at the university and has only been given to 8 people in its whole history. He's also chair of the Burton Blatt Institute at Syracuse University, which is a wonderful organization that does great good in the world for people with disabilities. Peter received a Juris Doctorate from Stanford University, where he was president of the Law Review, and a PhD in social psychology from Harvard. He has written articles and books on the Americans with Disabilities Act and related laws, and has received grants to study disability law and policy. Peter.
Thank you. Thank you, Ellen. My mother would be proud of that introduction. But she's not here, unfortunately. But still, I have a brother who's a neurologist who she refers to as the real doctor in the family. We all have one of those. Well, it's such an honor to be out here. It's almost too much to absorb in some ways, the amount of information and context we have. But what's so evident to me, coming from a university with a terrific veterans commitment, for example, we have the Institute for Veterans and Military Families, the IVMF, which has kind of taken off in the last couple of years, which we helped to start, is that there's an opportunity for people in this room, the younger people in particular, to be part of a new generation of thinkers and advocates in this area. The ADA is going to be 25 this year, the Americans with Disabilities Act. Most of my law students now were not born when the ADA was passed into law, and yet people in this room, many of them, have grown up in a world not knowing a world without the ADA, without the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, and of course all the other advances that have come in civil rights. And yet, what I've asked the panelists to talk about today is leadership and looking forward and innovative ideas. The headline of the New York Times today is "Jet Crash Raises Questions on Mental Illness Risks." Okay, so that's the headline in the New York Times today. The first case, right after the Americans with Disabilities Act that I had, under the ADA was in California, working with a gentleman with bipolar disorder who had been fired from a very large California law firm because they were afraid, he had bipolar disorder, that he was going to go postal when they found out what his condition was. Not unlike Tom Hanks in the movie Philadelphia. They basically iced him. Today, the ADA is 25. There are terrific advances, but terrific vigilance is needed as well. We have in this room a generation of veterans who have received terrific pushback with regard to mental health care services. We have ethicists, very distinguished ethicists, writing at the University of Pennsylvania that perhaps deinstitutionalization has failed and we should return to reinstitutionalization because of the homelessness and the mental health crisis on our streets. We have prisons. I'm working now on a very large case in Alabama with the Southern Poverty Law Center. We have prisons that essentially have become mental health holding places. The prisoners I see in the prison system in Alabama get no treatment, come from no treatment, expect no treatment going forward, and are disciplined by solitary confinement and mace. That is their treatment. We talk about drugs, we talk about meditation, we talk about mindlessness. There is a whole generation of young people in prisons who will come out and who will commit crimes again. The recidivism rate is something like 50% or higher because of the failings of the system. But I am actually optimistic. I'm optimistic because of the people in this room, and that there's an opportunity through the Sachs Institute for a new generation of leaders who will not tolerate these sorts of attitudinal approaches to mental health disability. If I have to say one thing, and I argue cases before the United States Court of Appeals and the District Court, regularly give talks, if I have to say one thing in all the matters that I work on, with regard to mental health and disability, it still comes down to attitudinal stigma. And it comes down to whether or not the person's going to be a risk, whether or not the person's going to be violent, whether or not the person's going to be disruptive somehow to the workplace. And we all know that there are very good studies which show that those are base rate fallacies. As Jerry was talking about earlier, it's very important to look at the context in which those statements are made. So today we have a very interesting final panel, and then there'll be a wrap-up. And I have the great privilege of introducing Dr. White, Julie White, as well as Adam and Nandini, who we'll talk about in a little bit. Julie White is a leader at Onondaga Community College. She's the principal investigator on a project that was awarded this past year by the U.S. Department of Labor, only one of 2 in the country, to set up a model demonstration program on how we can get to kids earlier with mental health and other conditions so that they can develop a pathway to get a job. And in this day's environment, you know, it's all about jobs, it's about education, as the veterans had talked about earlier. Julie's going to tell you about the project that is just getting underway at Onondaga Community College, which the Department of Labor is hoping will be a model for other types of programs that we will hear about today. Then we'll have commentary from Nandini and Adam, and I thank you all for your listening to this, and I think it'll be a very interesting panel. We'll take questions after that, and be thinking about, we had a lot of information today about where we've been. Think about where we're going. We're at the 25th anniversary of the ADA. We do not want to have the same conversation at the 50th anniversary of the ADA, for those of us that will still be in the room at that time. Julie?
Thank you so much, Peter, and good afternoon, everyone. Peter we had some great slides for him. He already said it all, so I'm going to move on and point out in regards to this project that I'm going to be speaking to you about. As Peter said, this is funded by the Office of Disability Employment Policy at the Department of Labor, one of 2 funded sites in the country, a partnership with our good friends at Syracuse University and the Syracuse City School District, as well as a number of employment partners and disability serving agencies. I want to talk about our goal with this project. This project is aimed at youth and young adults ages 14 through 24. So a big part of the project is our partnership with the City School District. Syracuse City School District, like many urban school districts, suffers from structural poverty, low graduation rates, and many other challenges that are probably familiar to all of you. We are working in partnership with them to provide employment pathways for students. And we're working in particular with the IEP transition planning process because we want to be able to really reshape how that transition planning is done through a partnership with ourselves and our other workforce partners. We are focusing for now on 4 high-priority, high-growth industries for our Economic Development Council. As you can see there, and these are the 4 academic programs that we are targeting to recruit students into: advanced manufacturing, health information technology, computer information systems, and electrical technology. These are programs that pay a living wage. We know too often young people with disabilities and with mental illness are underemployed. We are seeking to get them into jobs that will be fulfilling and will pay a living wage. Although the focus, as I said, is on our partnership with the City School District, we also have partnerships with our local Veteran Services and our Veterans Center on campus, as well as our Educational Opportunity Center, which serves out-of-school youth and young adults. So we will also be recruiting from those programs. Our project, as Peter says, is just getting underway, so I feel in some ways like I'm bringing to you, hey, we have this great idea, we think it's going to work. Hopefully I can come back in a few years and tell you how we did. This is a 5-year demonstration project. We receive funding every year contingent on doing okay the previous year, so that's our goal. We have 5 major goals for the project. Capacity building. We've had some conversation here about individual efforts, systemic efforts. This hopes to include both. We need to build capacity across our community for a comprehensive and coordinated system of support that promotes access, success, and career entry for all of our youth and young adults with disabilities. And this program is for all youth and young adults with disabilities. I will talk in particular and give some examples about the focus on mental illness and how we will support students in that particular situation. We also will be offering career exploration and educational access to young people, particularly through the high schools as well as through community agencies. We'll be focusing on increasing persistence and completion rates, and anybody who's following the national discourse in higher education knows that we need to pay increasing attention to that. That's an important part of fulfilling our mission. We want to increase living wage employment, and of course we want to disseminate what we learn to other community colleges and other communities as well, such as that gathered here today. Why are we doing this at community colleges? Why has the Department of Labor decided? We know that community colleges have a historical mission of access, and at community colleges, we enroll nearly half of all U.S. undergraduates. We are often not remembered in the higher education discourse, frankly. There's a lot of focus on traditional four-year institutions. I think President Obama and his administration has done a great deal to increase our focus on community colleges, but we've been here all along for quite a while, certainly since the 1960s and 70s when there was a huge boom, and we've been doing this for a long time. Nationwide, about 12% of community college students indicate that they are students with disabilities. And community colleges, we know how to work with employers and work with workforce development. So those are some of the strengths that we historically bring to this kind of work. OCC, I won't read all of that to you. We are one of 30 community colleges within the SUNY system. You can see we serve about 13,000 students. About 1,000 students are registered with our Office of Disability Services and 300 veterans registered with our Veterans Affairs Office. And like everywhere else, we know that New Yorkers with disabilities are employed at much lower rates than those without. So what do we hope to focus on in this project? First of all, as I said, transition planning and support so that we can get more students to go on to college. We can clarify how the levels of support from the secondary to the post-secondary sector translates. Many students lack information about college admissions and financial aid processes. This is true for all students, of course, but we think that we can do more in particular to help individuals with disabilities. So we've already started our partnership with Syracuse City School District for some career awareness days, some professional development for IEP transition planning, early awareness of those employment pathways. OPC is the name of our project, Onondaga Pathways to Careers. Onondaga, I should tell you, is the name of the Native American nation that is very near to our college, and we are in Onondaga County, so sometimes people wonder where that came from. It's an important part of our history. In addition, we will be helping students with the financial aid application, the college admissions application, students and families, I should say. And most recently, what we've talked with the school district about is having their school counselors and their special education teachers as a part of our planning and a part of our team, because without them, we're going to have a harder time getting awareness about this to the students and families. All right, with that, I'm going to have to just get out of here, and I'm going to show you a video. I'm going to show it in two different segments about a student, a current student at our college. He's not in this program since we just got it started, but he is a student who returned to college later in life than traditional age. He has had struggles with substance abuse, depression, anxiety, and he talks a little bit about how accessing services really has helped him. So I'm going to just cue this up.
I heard that I can get help through DSO due to my disability. and my injury to my head trauma. So I started working with Miss Carr. Well, first of all, she had guided me through the process of getting the right documentation, getting the right test done, so I can, get the right documentation for my disability to help me, further get the assistance I needed, through DSO. You just can't walk in and say, you need documentation. So she helped me, but she walked me through the process, which was wonderful because I didn't know what to do. They're patient. They're real patient with me. They always guide me in the right direction, and I'm always like, I just left from the tutor, so I always need help. So I ain't afraid to ask for it, and they help. They're there on time. I got 3.75 in fall. Like I was saying, the tutors, they suggested that I highly, stay connected and work with the tutors. And I use the tutors maybe 3 times or 4 times out of the week. About 4 hours, sometimes 5 hours with tutors, spread it out through the course of my week.
Do you just do individual?
I'm going to pause it there for a minute. I apologize. It sounded just fine on my computer at home. So I apologize. That's a little difficult to hear. But I wanted to incorporate a student voice into it. And in case you couldn't quite hear everything that he was saying, he was talking about he has a GPA of 3.75. He also has a traumatic brain injury from having been assaulted earlier in his life. So that's another challenge that he brings. He is a student who, like many of our community college students, has struggled to find his educational pathway. He's come to college, he's had to drop out for a time period, he's come back. He was talking about accessing tutoring services. So he has been able to take advantage of many of the services that we have, the tutoring, the Disability Services Office, meeting with faculty, peer support. Those are some of the same kinds of services that we will be able to wrap around students at a much earlier age and earlier time in their educational career. So let me just get back to the slide where I was. So once we get students there, that's great, and sometimes half the problem is just getting their financial aid taken care of, their admissions application taken care of, but that's really where the work begins, not where it ends. We know that individuals with disabilities and with mental illness need supports for social adjustment, academic development, self-advocacy. And again, I would say I think many of our entering students need these kinds of skills, but folks who are dealing with a disability or with a mental illness may have some additional needs around that. We'll be building in a whole system where when students begin, they will take a career assessment to see if one of our 4 pathways is the right fit for them, and if not, to help them get into another into another program that would be a better fit. We'll be helping them with educational planning, financial literacy, mandatory academic advisement so that they stay on course for their academic progress. Work-based learning, we built in service learning and internships to the program so that they will be in the workplace. Specialized tutoring, again, for the students in the project. Adaptive technology, like many colleges, we have an assistive technology lab, and we will be enhancing that through this project. We also have an emphasis on leadership development, and this will help to promote some of the social connections that we've been hearing so much about, getting students involved in student clubs and organizations. And we are also building a new program of wraparound services for students. We currently have a food pantry on campus that is well utilized. We will be expanding that. We will also be providing public assistance benefits screening on campus. We have a free legal aid clinic on campus. All of these things we've just started within the past few months, and we will be expanding and providing a direct track for our students into these kinds of services. As far as employment pathways, some of the challenges are that many of us know, and many of us probably entered college with undefined career goals. I was a piano major, so We all make a few twists and turns as we go. And it can help to have a little bit of assistance and think about, again, what is the right fit. And we know that at OCC, the students with disabilities are underrepresented in our career and technical education programs. So we really think that there is a great pathway that many students are not taking advantage of. We're going to be providing early exposure to these programs through our concurrent enrollment courses. So these are classes that are for dual high school and college credit that we offer in the high school so that students can try some things out and get a jump start on their college career. We have an early college model that we are developing with the city school district. Again, this will get students really to finish an associate's degree by the time they graduate from high school. And it will get them onto the college campus early, and again, it will help them get into the workforce or into their next level of education earlier. And we have just started with the city school district a new school for technology specifically. We also will be having employer-based curriculum development. We hear often from employers, and I think that this is a critique of higher education as a whole, that we don't really prepare students for the workforce. And this is true whatever field it is. It's a very common critique. So what we have learned is that there's a national model called DACUM, which just stands for Developing a Curriculum, in which expert workers in various fields come in and meet with our faculty and curriculum developers and help us build a curriculum that will actually prepare students for the workforce so that our training and education is matching the skills they need when they get to the job site. We also have articulation agreements with a number of colleges and universities for the four-year programs, but also with our local Board of Cooperative Educational Services, which offers a lot of technical and training programs at the secondary level. And we have agreements with the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers as well to help train their workforce. So we're going to be building on all of these collaborations and partnerships as we go forward to increase the access to those pathways for our students. I think because the video was not great, I will spare you the second half of that, but I will tell you that what this student goes on to talk about is that he actually found his career path through receiving some career counseling and working with faculty at OCC. He has decided to become a substance abuse counselor, and he is on track to graduate in a year. He's been doing an internship. He's been doing all of the things that I've been talking about, and they've helped him stay on track. Finally, we will be doing some capacity building, as I said, across the state, the region, and the state. We have developed a cross-institutional leadership team in order to mitigate those administrative barriers and leverage our existing infrastructure. What we all know is that we don't do collaboration really, frankly, very well in higher education. We were not really built for collaboration. So when we want to do it, we have to be very intentional about it. So we have folks coming to the table from across all of those sectors that I've been talking about and helping us look at the resources that we have, look at how we get where we want to go. I think that's going to turn out to be a really critical piece to whether or not we can be successful. We will be, but how we will be successful. Secondly, we'll be developing a community of practice, and our partners at the Burton Blatt Institute at Syracuse University are taking the lead on this in recruiting other community colleges to collaborate through virtual meetings, and we'll be developing a toolkit through that as well. And finally, we will be doing professional development on our campus as well as with all of our partners for some of these broader-based efforts that we know really can change a culture. Inclusive pedagogy, universal design, training will be offered for everybody involved in our project. And of course, we'll be doing some evaluation, and again, hopefully I'll be able to tell you more about that as we go. What I'm most excited about here is, again, through our partners working with Peter at the Burton Blatt Institute, is the organizational culture study that we'll be doing. So we've agreed at OCC to implement an organizational culture study with our employees about how they experience and feel about inclusion and working with individuals with disabilities. And we'll get a baseline, and then we'll be able to do to do that at the end, and then we'll see how attitudes have shifted. So I think that will be really interesting for us. So with that, I will turn it over to the rest of the panel.
Thank you, Julie. That was great. Thank you, Julie. Julie's very modest. This is a multi-million-dollar project over several years, which the Department of Labor is looking at very carefully. They have about $3 billion behind it because they're all about jobs. So this can hopefully be a model program that won't solve all the problems, but that will provide new and interesting information about the way in which an organization reacts, perceives to, responds to mental health issues, reasonable accommodation requests, follow up on monitoring of all those issues as well. We're hoping to have some real hard outcome measures with regard to that. Now, our panelists, I hadn't met before I came out here, but are two very impressive individuals. We actually spoke on the phone. Nandini Dorothy? Okay, first I got her first name mispronounced. I just told her she could call me Petter, and that would be even. She's a fourth-year JD MBA candidate at the Gould School of Law, and really has a wealth of experience she wants to talk to you about. And then Adam Renteria, who's the president and CEO of Valiant VA Claim Services. Once you meet him, you will be getting emails about his business, which I delightfully read and refer clients to as much as I can. These two guys are at the leading edge of the new generation we talked about, and I think they can provide very important insights, not only about what they've seen in the past, but what their aspirations are for the future and where we hope to be over the next coming years. So Nandini, do you want to start first? You want to come up here or you want to go there?
This is fine. Hi, everyone. So a few years ago, I was actually over at the Law Building Cafe debating something pretty inconsequential with a friend. And he began raising his voice and shifting his posture and kind of changing his body language. When he was about 6 inches from my face and his arms were swinging wildly, I felt powerless, as though I had no control over the situation. So I knew I had to step out and recollect my thoughts, take some time off, and I hung out in the bathroom for a bit. And I was listening to some Ace of Base. I hope that that's not leaving this room. And I was talking myself through to a point of calm. So whatever that conversation was about, it didn't matter. It was about recognizing that this wasn't something that I needed to control. It was also about letting my friend know, hey, this made me uncomfortable. And you were just expressing your thoughts in a way that's intuitive to you, but I appreciate if we could work together and have this conversation in a calmer setting. Ultimately, it's about understanding a situation and how it makes me feel, but also translating that experience in a way that helps others understand. I'm Nandini Dasarathi, and I'm a fourth year at USC Law in the Marshall School of Business. I have anxiety. It's often the little things, the things my peers think are silly and not worth worrying about. I rarely feel overwhelmed by exams or work responsibilities, and it's about the times that people start raising their voices around me, and whether that's hostile or not. It's also about the times that the girl in front of me at the library is tapping her pencil on the desk, and I'm trying to read. I mean, it's the things that I feel that I have no control over, but over time I've been able to stop and think about those things and when, why, and how they bother me. So being able to handle those things case by case, whether it's realizing that the matter's inconsequential or that it can be overcome, has made a world of difference. So during my third year of college, I started becoming more self-aware of when, why, and how I was feeling as a response to various situations. I saw my classmates stress over midterms, papers, and finals, and I thought maybe I was stressed too. Except I generally felt good about exams when I walked in, and I always made progress on papers well in advance of the deadline. I noticed, though, that I would freeze when carrying like an armful of groceries, terrified that they would fall. I felt tense when walking to class, actively trying to avoid patches of slush, thinking I'd slip with just one wrong step. And I went to school in upstate New York, so you can imagine how often that was. So altercations with friends would make me feel overwhelmed and powerless. In an environment such as a college campus, where your interactions with your peers are abundant and individuals are developing that emotional maturity, relationships can be formed and broken over confrontations, controversies, and clashes, all of which would make me feel anxious. If I didn't think I could control a situation, I became restless, irritable, and afraid. At the same time, my peers would consider this so trivial. You're getting worked up over a little argument with Anne, you know she doesn't care, right? Or if noises bother you, wear earplugs or headphones or leave the library, it's not that hard. Or my personal favorite, you have good grades, stop complaining, you're just a type A person. So, I mean, moving on, realizing and accepting the way that I felt as a consequence of adverse situations kind of allowed me to think clearly about what I could do to ease myself into moments of uncertainty. So I'd come to terms with the fact that worrying and poring over the minute details of my life was exhausting and wearing me down. My family suggested using music, yoga, meditation, and reading as forms of calming the mind down or letting go of the need to control. Though, as a disclaimer, I have to say that the first few times I did the half moon or the side crow, I was really concerned about not falling. I mean, their advice has been invaluable. If I ever feel uncomfortable, overwhelmed, or anxious about a situation, I turn to these outlets, which allow me to remove myself from the source of discomfort and regain balance, literally. Music, yoga, and meditation have also helped me over time to not sweat the small stuff, for lack of a better term. You're going to fall the first several times that you do the half moon. Sorry, that's just gonna happen. I sing, there's some times that my voice isn't at its best, and that's okay. I still can't meditate without jumping from thought to thought, mostly ending in what I'm gonna have for dinner. Sorry. Ultimately, taking on activities that I enjoy and I'm comfortable approaching at my own pace allows me to be content with what I don't know or can't control. It's, of course, a daily decision. There's no universal fix, but there are certainly ways to think about and react differently to situations that helps one feel less anxious. It's also important to be able to articulate to others what you're feeling. Some friends were incredibly receptive. They knew that aggressive confrontations, for instance, made me really uncomfortable and would engage in a collected conversation about an issue. Others less so. It's hard to empathize when you find the other person's discomfort to be trivial. It's also hard to measure what we as a society should be sensitive toward. There have definitely been times when I've dismissed a friend or family member's concern as not a big deal, as many times has been done to me. The thing, though, is that achieving well-being is such a personal journey. No one should be able to say, well, this isn't a big deal, so why does it bother you? Instead, we should be open to talking with friends and family to understand how to work with them better. My choice of music, yoga, or meditation is just one approach to achieving well-being. Others I've spoken to found therapy, talking to a counselor, or medication treatment equally effective. Music, yoga, and meditation are popular in the eastern part of the world, and especially so among South Asians, and I'm of South Asian descent myself. South Asian families may often support each other to engage in these practices as a way of calming the mind, achieving balance, or letting go of a need to control. In my experience, as well as in many others, this can be extremely helpful and support healthier activities and lifestyles. At the same time, I want to stress that for an individual in college becoming self-aware of when, why, and how that he or she feels this particular way, there's no substitute for the support of close friends and family. Unfortunately, I've seen too many friends of South Asian descent in college struggle to be open about these thoughts and feelings with their families. And I want to urge those students' families especially to welcome these conversations, explore what the individual's needs are and how they can best be met. I'm graduating from both the law and business schools in May and going to work on at a big firm this fall. I'm sure there'll be moments that require me to step back and assess why and how I feel a certain way. And I'll be using many of the outlets that I've described and perhaps some more. I look forward to finding activities outside of my core responsibilities that will function as outlets to help me change the way that I think about and react to these adverse situations. I also plan to maintain relationships with friends and family who facilitate that healthier lifestyle. And as you all know, Peter mentioned today, it is the 25th anniversary of the ADA. As we move forward, we realize from many of the speakers today how many resources there are and how many resources will continue to emerge within schools, within colleges, within the workplace, and we need to make sure that the trajectory continues. I want to stress again that ultimately what affects someone and how he or she chooses to address it will vary incredibly from person to person. It's crucial for college students to develop that self-awareness, discuss their feelings with trusted individuals, and determine means of thinking and reacting differently to adverse situations. For the rest of us, let's keep in mind the college students in our lives, our friends, our family, our acquaintances, our mentees, students, employees, and neighbors. Let's listen to them and let's help them create environments where they will thrive. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you. Thank you, Nandini. I'm glad you chose a non-confrontational, low-key career
Well,
going forward. Actually, you'll be great at that. You know, on a serious note, in this case I was telling you about in California, very sophisticated lawyers, a guy with stress disorder and bipolar, and the general counsel who was testifying said something like, "We're all stressed. I don't think this guy has a disability. You know, I got problems too." The point was he couldn't empathize at all or appreciate what it meant from your perspective, and just blew off that this is just do the job. And I think too many people don't hear what you're saying. It's nice to hear kind of your friends who are reacting to what you need. So that was very nice. Thank you. Adam, you're up.
Wow, thank you. That was quite impressive. One of my favorite things to do actually is to spend my days hanging out with people that are much smarter and more sophisticated than I am. So thank you for allowing me and Rakasan to come and spend some time with you guys. Wow, what an amazing conference today, symposium. A lot of fantastic ideas and discussions and dialogues have been going around all day long. And as somebody who participates in the ADA on a daily, if not hourly basis, I can truly appreciate the direction of the discourse. You know, I myself too ended up from, you know, a war zone in Iraq to a community college campus within 3 months' time. And during my first 3 months, I got asked to leave because I wasn't quite ready for, you know, campus lifestyle after a somewhat violent altercation with somebody who was protesting the war. I had no idea what was going on with me emotionally, mentally. I just knew that somebody was didn't agree with what we were doing over there, and me coming from, you know, the hot spot of war, decided to take matters into my own hands. Probably wasn't the best decision. However, when I came onto a community college campus in 2005, there was absolutely no resources for anybody who was coming home like I was. I was a few years older than all the other students, and I had an experience unlike anybody else, probably campus-wide. So after I left, I spent some time homeless on the streets, trying to figure out how I'm gonna come back to my son, and then all of a sudden I knew that there came a moment in which personal responsibility was going to get me out of the situation, meaning I understood that I had to take ownership of my own treatment and my own therapy and figure out how I was going to not let whatever was happening to me or define me. Not let, you know, PTSD, traumatic brain injury, severe lower back degenerative disc disease from my time in service defined the rest of my life. I was only 24 years old when I came home, and I knew that I had an entire life to live, and I wasn't going to be put into a box. So I started seeking services. I had no idea where I was going to go, who I was going to talk to, but I knew I had to start somewhere. And by that time, I ended up at Long Beach State, right next to the Long Beach VA, and since then have been in treatment ever since. That included speech pathology a few different times, occupational therapy a few different times, physical therapy a few different times. I'm in the TBI clinic currently, and weekly, if not bi-weekly, individual psychotherapy appointments at my local vet center. With that being said, I felt like becoming a steward of my own transition and my own treatment was going to be the way to go. It was the only way that I was going to survive. I tried several different modalities in terms of medications, in terms of exercising, and in terms of, you know, finding different outlets. And what I want to impose is that although there are a vast array, there is something for everybody. There's not just one size fits all in terms of treatment. There's not one size fits all in terms of, you know, how you're going to handle your therapy or how you're going to get to overall wellness, because that's what it's all about. It's about getting to wellness. It's about getting to healing. It's about taking it day by day and really understanding who you are and where you're going. And I know that's a very difficult process, but it does exist. And then in 2012, while earning a master's degree here at USC in the social work department, I started a relapse again from back when my original transition. And I knew that I really had to step my game up in terms of my therapy, or else I wasn't going to make it out this time, because there was a few different treatments the VA wanted that I just absolutely refused to do. And that's how I met Rakasan. Some of you have seen. Oh, there he is behind me. That's how I met Rakasan. And once I met Rakasan and he and I partnered up together, I knew that I had found my way. I had found my outlet. And I started to see life through Rakasan's eyes. I started to see the world through the way he saw it. And it took me from here all the way to the White House and back, where seeing that Rakasan is who he is, no matter where he is, no matter who's standing in front of him. And really owning that self-honesty, being true to oneself, being able to really be in the moment and see the world through a different perspective, unlike I had ever known before. Opened my door to love, opened my door to empathy, opened my door to understanding not just my situation and what I was going through, but everybody else's and what they were going through and how they were different yet similar to me. And then when I graduated, I had seen where there might have been a few disconnects in terms of service providers out there. We have, and I'm speaking from the veteran perspective, and it could flow over to the civilian perspective as well. But this is from the VA and from what I've seen. In terms of service providing, there's a monopoly between veteran service officers who are kind of your frontline service officers who file disability benefits for veterans and their families, and then the VA. So what I saw was that the VA was paying these VSOs to get money back from the VA. And I was wondering why so many veterans were not receiving benefits and so many veterans were highly underrated, if they were rated at all. And so a partner of mine who I had worked with on my own disability claim approached me and said, hey, how about we start our own organization, but we do it from a for-profit perspective? Meaning, how are we going to infuse capitalism, competition, and excellence into the industry to change the industrial standard on how we provide services to veterans? How do we hold ourselves accountable and not be accountable to anybody else? So what we're starting to see is that our veterans who are coming to us are receiving, first of all, a complete biopsychosocial assessment. Everybody and every veteran that comes in and their family are receiving these clinical services in terms of who they are, where they are, not just a veteran and a social security number. We're able to identify not just skeletal disabilities, physical and emotional, but exactly what the experiences are and how they can become good stewards of their own transition and build their own relationship with the VA. There's this big, massive bureaucracy out here, but that doesn't mean that one has to be simply just a number and an appointment time slot. If one can truly understand where one stands in terms of their transition and their experience, then they'd be able to communicate that better with some of their service providers and then take their discussion to a whole different level, take their treatment to a completely different place where they've never thought of before and really start to move down that path towards healing. It's one thing that I found to completely receive treatment and develop a toolkit of coping mechanisms. That's the easy part. What was difficult was the healing part, was the moving forward part, and in terms of building relationships with other people, building relationships with myself, building relationships with my friends, my families, and complete strangers, what I never used to do before. And so at Valiant, we're teaching veterans how to communicate with their service providers, communicate with their therapists, communicate with the VA. We're teaching them how to take ownership of their transition, treatment, and therapeutic services. We're helping them build their disability claims, but not from a disabling perspective, but from a functional perspective, meaning that just because you're filing a disability claim and you receive a 70, 80, 90%, even 100% disability rating, that doesn't mean you have 100% loss in functionality. There's a complete difference in that, and I think we have to move away from the disabling box and really look towards, like we talked about today, is the functionality of it. We can completely function just like everybody else and have these disabilities. People ask me all the time, well, why do you need a service dog? You're not blind. You're not disabled. Well, a lot of disabilities that people have are internal. A lot of disabilities that people have are emotional, are mental, are inside of my skin. I understand I don't present blind or I'm not a double amputee, but that doesn't mean that I don't have my own personal experiences. And I thank you, fine folks, for coming here today, spending a Monday, which I know people don't like Mondays, but I love Mondays, to discuss this and to move the discourse in a different direction, to where we're changing the dialogue, we're changing the stigma in our culture as we see it, and then really giving people empowerment and giving people the opportunity to find themselves and fulfill themselves so that they can move down a path towards healing, whatever that healing is, so that it's not just I'm identified by my PTSD, I'm identified by my TBI. And the reason why I got into a violent altercation was because I have PTSD or was because I had TBI. No, that's not the case at all. It's because there was some treatment out there, there was some services out there that I hadn't quite received access to, and once I found out to where those services were and created my own access point and took responsibility to go and to interact with my own treatment, then I really started to figure out that I wasn't just a function of my experience or a victim of my circumstance, that I really could take ownership and move on beyond functionality of the standard quote unquote, oh, you're just a veteran with PTSD.
Thank you, Adam. Thank you, Adam. I whispered to Julie we should hire this guy and bring him to do some workshops in Syracuse. You may be you need a winter coat to come out there.
I'll come during the summertime.
You know, what you raise also, we haven't gotten into our policy discussions, but for your generation, until we stop paying through our welfare system people not to work, and instead of paying people, helping people with supports to work, we're going to drive incentives all in the wrong directions. We continue to do that. I wanted to give Julie a quick chance to respond to you two great guys, and then open it up for questions, because I think we're right on time. Julie,
Great,
just take
sure.
a minute.
Just a minute. Thank you, Nandini and Adam. Really inspiring for sharing what you have to say. And I'm just going to make a few comments that really refer to earlier presentations. Cornell is doing great work. California's system is doing great work. But the things that really resonated for me and what you had to say as far as what campuses can do, one of the things that we have is a quiet space, and I think maybe Cornell said they have that as well. Some kind of a space when people are starting to feel overwhelmed. For our veterans, that tends to be in our Veterans Center. For students with disabilities who are not veterans, we have a space in the Disability Services Office. So there are a couple of access points on campus. I think that's really, really important. I also think your combined stories really show how we had some conversation earlier. Each person gets there, so to speak, to recovery in a way that works for them. We have to take the cultural context into account. We have to understand that medication might be the answer for one person and yoga might be the answer for another person, and allow the opportunity to explore those modalities. I'd love to see policies that supported that through funding and for healthcare access, in fact. And the other thing I wanted to just point out is the importance of the social supports, including family. In higher education, I really don't like the phrase helicopter parents. I want the parents to be involved and to care. It's really important. Of course, we all need help with boundaries sometimes, but I don't think that's useful. I think it's much more useful to engage with parents as partners, and that can be particularly challenging sometimes to help our own staff understand that and understand how you can do that productively. So it was great to hear that your family was such an important support, because it is for many of our students. And finally, just to have role models like the two of you on campus and through the kinds of programs that we've heard about earlier, provides that hope, that focus on the whole person and on where you're going in your whole life. I think is really important. So thank you again.
Thank you, Julie. Let's open it up for questions with our mic guys and gals are around somewhere.
Just very quickly, throughout the day, Julie, you picked up on the theme that people have been talking about how highly individualized what works may be. And Nandini, you located music, yoga, and meditation very much in your culture. that those were things that your culture gave you to be available. So my question, Adam, is where did you get Rakashan? Who suggested that you might, and had it ever occurred to you before that you might have someone like Rakashan in your life?
Well, little caveat, I don't like dogs. I don't. I've had cats.
They don't like people.
Right? No, I don't like dogs. I've had cats all my life. I've never been without a cat. Even when I was active duty in the military, I was fortunate enough to have 2 cats, and I still have 2 cats today. But I'm glad you asked that question, because Rakashan came to me through a suggestion from one of my family members who I was opening up to, knowing that I needed a different way. I needed something that was going to help me heal, because I was getting tired of relapsing, back into my PTSD thought process, quote unquote, for lack of a better term. And so I actually listened. I said, okay, I'm willing to give it a shot. Like you said, there needs to be, policy programs and funding in place so that people have an opportunity to try different things. And during that process of getting Rakashan, it took 3 months for him to be matched. I went through an organization called Pets for Vets, and it took 3 months for him to be matched. During that time period, I had a lot of anxiety about, caring for another living being for a service dog. I hadn't heard of service dogs for PTSD before then, but I was open to the idea of healing, but closed to the idea of getting a dog. So I was very anxious about that. However, I appreciated the fact that with Pets for Vets, if it did not work, that was okay. That if for some reason Rakashan and I didn't bond, or that our training wasn't going to work out, or it wasn't going to work for me, like, that was okay, and I didn't have to be stuck with that one particular way. So when he was delivered, we started our training together, and there was an instant bond that I knew it was going to work, although it was going to take a while, but it was going to be my way. I had tried different ways. There was some ways that I actually refused to try, and there was some things that I was willing to try. And Rakashan was one of the first things that I was willing to try that came my way. And if he had come two years before I got him, it wouldn't have worked, just because of where I was at personally. But if he came 2 years after he did, I may not have made it. So I think he came at just the right time. He's divine intervention. I'm going to say that all day long. He was my gift from God at the exact right moment that I needed him, and that I was willing to accept him into my life.
Adam, tell them what you told me earlier today about the Avatar movie, and because I asked him a similar question this morning.
Has everybody here seen the movie Avatar, when they connect to their dragons and their horses? And that's how Rakashan and I are connected. We are actually connected through the leash. We communicate through the leash. We sense each other through our leash. I see what he sees, and he sees what I see. Unfortunately, I haven't got to the smell part yet, but I'm pretty close to it. But Rakashan and I, our connection through our leash is very similar to the connection that you saw in the movie Avatar. And if you haven't seen it, think about it in a more other terms is like an umbilical cord. We are truly bonded by our leash, and so it's that connection that my heart was closed off to before I got him, that I allowed to open up to not just him, but now to other people, including my friends and my family, who I also kept on the outside.
Fantastic. Other questions?
Hi, as a fellow law student here at USC, I'm going to address this actually to Adam Renteria. I've also experienced the dislocation of being an older student among a younger population. And so one question I have for you is, what in your research exploration have you found in terms of best practices for educating administrators on what type of actions they can take, what types of programs they can provide during orientation and ongoing to better assist students who are coming from non-traditional backgrounds, and not necessarily by age, but also veterans, also other types of groups that have specialized needs that differ from the majority of students?
That's a really excellent question, and it goes back to everybody has their own story. And I think we as a culture, especially here in America, need to slow down how we see people and look at people as to who they are exactly at that moment. Meaning that is a live person with a story, and we all don't know each other's story. The thing about the veteran community is that it's the most diverse small community in America. We have everybody. There's not one small little community that the veteran community doesn't have. So it's identifying that each person is their own person. Everybody's got a story, and you don't know that person's story. And take the time, even if it's just a few minutes. People will love to talk about themselves. Give people, even if it's a brief 60, 90 second, 3 minutes, tell me your story. What's going on with you right now, and how can I help? Listen to people and what it is that they say, and give them an opportunity to connect. And I think if we can, and it's unfortunate that we have to train people to do that, but that's just where we're at now. And if we can bestow that upon anybody who's interacting with anybody, so education, business, law, wherever you are, you're interacting with people, give them an opportunity to briefly tell their stories, because you never, ever, ever, ever know who it is that you're talking to, ever. And so I think that would be the answer, is especially for an older student. You know, they got kids, they got spouses, they got lives, they got bills. Everybody's got their own situation and story, and I think if people understand that and empathize with that, we could start to see bridging the gap on that.
I want to piggyback on that and brag a little bit on community colleges and encourage folks, if you don't work at a community college, to check that out, because we're open access institutions. So we also have everyone. And when folks come to our orientation, there are no assumptions about their background, about where they came from. They often bring support people. At some schools, you would assume that would be a parent. We get people coming with their children, with their spouses, with their advocates, with their friends, with their aunt, with their godmother. It's just, it's wonderful. And so we have to always, as you said, really check our assumptions, because each individual has their own story. And so what we do is we make sure that everyone is included in the large-scale activities, and that we have separate time where folks can interact with people who may have similar life experiences to them, so they can also make those connections.
Other questions? Yes.
Yes, I want to thank the entire panel and all the panels today. This has been a fabulous event. Ellen and Steve and Chris, thank you for putting this on. And I want to say how powerful it is to talk about the fact that we're story-bearing individuals, and taking time to listen to stories helps us build the skill of empathy. So I want to ask Nadia, I guess, did I say that correct? Oh, I'm sorry, I apologize. What I very much appreciated what you said, and my question is really aimed toward you, because as we talk about a class for undergraduates, would it have been helpful had you had a class? It sounds like you found these tools by yourself. You had supportive family and friends, but if you had a class, as we think about a mindfulness class, that's really not about mindfulness as much as it's about being aware of the why that we're triggered and how we stop and have choices. Would that have been helpful to you?
Absolutely. I think it's helpful to anyone, and honestly, anything that I have done, I'm more than happy to share with people, and I have been very vocal about it. At the same time, we realize, right, that different things work for different people. So making that available is absolutely crucial. But having that be voluntary and, making a huge deal of it, saying that here are the benefits, why don't you try it out? Come for just one day. A lot of people do have this kind of why should I? No, I'm not going to do yoga. That's stupid. It's things like that, you know. So it's just making that available and stressing the need to try something like that. But you know what? Ultimately, it's that person's decision. So it's see if it works for you. If it's not, that's fine.
Good question. Other questions?
Hi, I was wondering if you could speak, I know this is a little bit awkward, but we haven't heard any stories from women veterans, and I was just wondering if you could speak to how where you work supports the needs of women veterans.
Oh, thank you for asking. Now, we love our women veterans. Actually, my business partner, my VSO that I work with, is a female. She also graduated from here with her degree in social work a year before I did. And she's been doing veteran benefit claims for 15 years. And what makes her the best in the industry is that she connects to everybody. One of the things about being a for-profit company is that we get to call our own shots. We get to play by our own set of rules and do whatever it is that we feel that we need to do to be the best in the industry. And so that means providing services to everybody. We're completely non-discriminate. We're not bound by anybody else's funding rules, funding box, saying who you can and can't serve, what, pre, post 9/11, pre 9/11, women vets, male vets, vets with kids, vets without kids. We could provide services to each and everybody, and we're happy to say that one of the things that I'm very proud of is our office is located in a building that often gets referred to that looks like an apartment. Literally, when you walk into our office, the structure of the building is kind of old antique, and it's very green. There's a lot of green. Everywhere is plants, and a waterfall. It's very green. And when our women veterans come in, it's first of all, it's a very tranquil environment. And I'm able to leave the room, and a lot of times I'll leave Rakko-san in there, but I'm able to leave the room and to see the look on their faces when they come out, a look of validation, a look of acceptance, a look of their story was heard, validated, and now is being addressed. And to see that all in their face, all in their eye, is why we have our business model the way we have it set up. So there's absolutely nobody that we turn away, unless, of course, we can't take their case, because there is no case. But it's completely non-demographically driven in terms of who we can and can't serve, or who we don't and don't serve. It's completely based on, does the law give us a case or not? And that's why we love what we do. And that's why I love my business partner as much as I do, because we're able to provide a service unlike anybody else. In terms of all veterans, male, female, pre, post, World War II, long-term aid and attendance. With dependents, we have a lot of dependents that we're working with, a lot of surviving spouses that we're working with, and to see the look on a widow's face who's in the middle of crisis, in the middle of grief, walk out of our office with a plan, a strategy to engage a very difficult process, and just be completely at peace with that is why we have our company set up the way we do.
Thank you, Adam. Was there a question back here?
Yeah, I have a question. Are there any initiatives to kind of retrain people who have aged out of the whole college system? Because so many people, as you said, who are mentally ill or end up on the streets or in prison, or just don't have the same access to education and as maybe some of the younger people going to college today.
Sure, I can talk about that a little bit. I think you see a lot of, again, particularly community colleges focusing on retraining. Most community colleges, but I can speak to ours, we have a number of both credit and non-credit programs, and you're starting to see an increase and an emphasis from the Department of Labor in particular on non-credit programs, sort of short-term certificate, or even not quite a certificate, but a training program that for somebody who wants to get into the workforce, they can do that. Again, we'll accept anyone, regardless of age and regardless of what kind of program they want to go into. But there are a lot of federally funded programs that are beginning to happen through
I'm not going to remember the acronym, it's TACT grants. It's for community training, Trade Adjustment Act, community college, something like that. But they are through the Department of Labor, and they are specifically focused in getting folks into the workforce, and in particular, retraining. So that would be a good place to look for somebody who's interested in that.
We also have about 1 million young men, mostly men, some women, behind bars, and in California and elsewhere, with the MacArthur Foundation and others, there's a big focus now on reintegration into society. Many of those individuals coming out of prisons and jails have some form of substance abuse, post-traumatic stress disorder, mental health condition, and without that kind of support, we're going to be in this vicious cycle of recidivism. Other questions? Yes.
Hi. First, thank you so much to all of the thoughtful remarks and stories that we got to hear throughout the day. One common thread, and someone made a remark about this earlier, is how we're providing individualized attention creatively. We're thinking out of the box in how we're serving students. And then to answer one of the questions that was just posed about retraining programs, it's not a retraining program as much as a reintegration program into college. I'm Courtney, I'm from Boston University, and I work at the Center for Psych Rehab, where we're running a program for college students who are on a leave of absence for a mental health related reason. So they do coursework, and they're provided with individualized coaching for 30 weeks. And so 15 of those weeks is while they're on campus doing the coursework at BU. It's not for credit, but in wellness and some academic skills building. And for the following 15 weeks, it's about reintegration, and we really, like, figuratively, literally meet students where they are, and we treat the inability for a student to independently go to class, to go to the Disability Services Office, to get those resources as the barrier. So we think about it. We're at BU, we're not BU Disability Services, but we think about it as an accommodation, and have been major advocates to Disability Services Office to provide this kind of service, meeting a student downstairs, taking them to coffee, whatever it is, just to open a dialogue and remove small barriers to make access just a little bit easier. I wonder where we are globally in making that happen, but small steps, I guess.
Great comment. We have time for one more question. Who would like to be the last question? Yes, ma'am. Wait for the microphone, please.
Hi. You were just saying something about the jails. And I'm wondering about HIPAA laws.
About?
HIPAA laws.
Yeah.
Families who have the kind of mental illness where it's non-compliant, and they are left with no recourse. So I think that a lot of people lose the ability to take care of their mentally ill person, and their mentally ill person ends up homeless, and then they end up in the jails. And I really think that that's a horrible problem, not only just for the society as a whole, but what about the family who's trying to do something with a person who's so mentally ill that they do not know that they're mentally ill, non-compliant? Speak to that.
My son graduated from Cornell, and I'm a big fan of Cornell. David Skorton is a friend of mine, so that's prefacing this story. We had a family tragedy. Our closest friend in the world, their son died from drug overdose. He was a sophomore at Cornell. He had suffered from depression, bipolar. Since he was over 18, they could not contact the parents because of HIPAA rules. And it's a very difficult area that has to be addressed. I mean, how do you deal with the privacy implications on one side, but of course making the parents know what the condition was, and unfortunately in this case it was too late.
But your sign up there says health law policy and ethics. Are you working on any policy with regard to that type of situation?
That would be the Sachs Institute. That sign says that. And the next, I'm just joking, the next panel we're going to hear all about that, because at the Sachs Institute you have preeminent leaders, including Dr. Sachs and others, on that exact issue. But you're absolutely right. Ellen has written on, and you will hear about, issues of privacy, consent, informed consent, the involvement of the parents, and maybe that's something you can address, Ellen, a little bit, or we will address in the last panel. This is a big area that many of us have dealt with. Thank you for that comment. I think that brings us to the end, and we will set up for our last panel, which will be the finale, led by Dr. Sachs. Thank you all. Thank you. Great job.